I'm Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, September the 4th, 2014. The IDF fired at a Syrian army position across the border today from Israel after yet another mortar from Syria landed in the country. As you may have seen on IBA News, the mortar shell from Syria landed in the Golan Heights, not causing damage or injury, and was likely the result of errant fire in the battles between the army of Bashar al-Assad and Syrian rebels. The IDF fired back and said that it holds the Syrian army responsible for all cross-border fire into Israel. French news agency AFP reports that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's talks with Palestinian officials in Washington yesterday were, quote, constructive. Kerry met with the Palestinian negotiators for over 2 hours. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki said it was a constructive conversation that covered a range of issues, including Gaza, Israeli-Palestinian relations, and recent developments in the region. Former Israeli President Shimon Peres met with Pope Francis at the Vatican today, where the two addressed the recent rise in anti-Semitism, in particular in Europe, the current concerns in the Middle East in light of the recent conflict with Hamas, and the need to unite against the common enemy of terror. 4 months after a deadly attack took the lives of 4 people there, the Jewish Museum of Belgium has announced they will officially reopen later this month. The museum in Brussels is set to open its doors to the public on September the 14th as part of the European Day of Jewish Culture. As you may recall, on May the 24th, 2 Israeli tourists, a French volunteer at the museum, and a Belgian employee were shot and killed at the museum by a gunman later named as French-Algerian national Mehdi Nemouche, who was arrested in France shortly after and later extradited to Belgium. The European Association for the Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Culture and Heritage has called on the participants in the Day of Culture on the 14th to hold a moment of silence for the victims at this year's events. And the Shanghai Jewish Refugees Museum unveiled a memorial this week, a 110-foot copper wall of remembrance with the names of 13,732 Jews who fled the Nazis during World War II, finding refuge in China. Museum curator Chen Jian calls the wall Shanghai's list. It was unveiled on Tuesday at a public ceremony. Approximately 20,000 Jewish refugees fled Europe and arrived to Shanghai during the Holocaust. Jewish comic book artist Stan Goldberg has died. Goldberg was the color designer for Marvel Comics' classic superheroes. His work displayed on almost every Marvel cover in the 1950s and 60s when he began to illustrate for Archie Comics, where he stayed for over 40 years. He was inducted into the National Cartoonist Society Hall of Fame and awarded with its Golden Key Award in 2012. Goldberg died this past Sunday at the age of 82 in the Bronx, New York, after suffering a stroke several weeks ago. He is survived by his wife, 2 sons, and 4 grandchildren. A new Center for Jewish Life is in the works at Drexel University in Philadelphia. The Jewish Exponent reports that this is to the credit of a $6 million pledge from Jewish philanthropist Raymond Perelman. The new 14,000-foot facility, which will be named the Raymond G. Perelman Center for Jewish Life, is set to open in the fall of 2016. It will be the new home of Hillel at the university and will also house an event space and a kosher kitchen, among other things. Perelman, who received an honorary doctoral degree from Drexel a few years ago, has donated to the school in the past. He said of the new endeavor and the school's president, John Fry, "I recognized a university president who truly wants to make his institution more welcoming to Jewish youth, saying I was delighted to help support something I deeply care about." A team of volunteer doctors from the U.S. returned home this week after lending a hand in Ashkelon's Barzilai Medical Center. The group is part of the nonprofit organization Emergency Volunteer Project. They had flown to Israel last week expecting to help the staff deal with victims of rocket attacks, but were told on the way that a ceasefire with Hamas had gone into effect. The volunteer personnel stayed regardless to help out at the hospital and help relieve the medical staff in Ashkelon, a city hard hit by the rockets from Gaza. The recent effort was deployed in coordination with support from the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, the Associated Jewish Community Federation of Baltimore, and Pastor John Hagee. And turning now to our Shalom TV programming for tonight, Thursday, September the 4th. At 9 o'clock, Mark Golub sits down with Executive Director of the Bronfman Center for Jewish Student Life at New York University, Yehuda Sarna, to talk about the Jewish future for young people on L'chaim. And then at 10 o'clock, the director of the Museum for the History of Polish Jews, Dariusz Stola, talks about the museum that he calls a theater of history, telling the story of the Jews of Poland. That's tonight here on Shalom TV and shalomtv.com. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, September the 4th, 2014. I'm Teisha Bader.